Everyone is being driven, whether it be ambitiously driven towards power or driven into depression or driven to get involved in sports or just the drive to try and stay secure and safe. Everyone is driven. Life is a driving force itself. But to use that drive to realize our true self that is free from struggle, that is the purpose, to be free from struggle.
Welcome to Deeper Threads, a podcast where we explore what lies beneath the surface, both in ourselves and in the world. I'm Lara Charles, author of Joy Regardless. Alongside wise and inspiring guests, we talk about life's big questions, the inner landscapes we often ignore, the outdated scripts we've inherited, and what they're costing us, all for one purpose, to help us remember who we are. Let's jump in. I love this episode, and that's because I love today's guest, the person who has helped me reclaim my true self, the self that exists beneath the noise of my mind. Today I'm joined by Shikhaa, co-founder of the Wisdom of Meditation Centre, just north of Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Before that, she spent 4 decades living in an ashram in India, studying the ancient Vedic tradition under her guru, Swami Sham. After Swami's gentle nudge for her to share this knowledge with the West, Shikhaa began teaching, and now people all over the world tune in each week to hear her speak. I am one of those people, and I'm usually the annoying one asking all the questions. And I ask so many questions because this knowledge is so deep and so vast, some of it goes completely over my head. So, if you're finding the same thing in this episode, please stick with it. Because, in a way, this information is supposed to bypass our heads. It's meant for our hearts and souls, the place where truth resides. And I promise you this, the truth that lives inside your soul will recognize the truth in Shikhaa's words, even if your mind is struggling with it. In this episode, we go deep, exploring the big questions like the purpose of life and what is God. So, if you're ready to open to the deepest of deeper threads, then please enjoy this conversation with the wise, warm, and wonderful Shikhaa. I hope you enjoy this chat. If you do, please share it with anyone you think would resonate with exploring the deeper threads of life. And subscribe over at laracharles.substack.com for more conversations and reflections. The link is in the show notes. Shikhaa, thank you so much for being here. I'm just so delighted. So I've got many questions, as you can imagine, because you know me well. But before we get into that, I am really fascinated by what led you on this spiritual path, because I think many of us can relate to, just being a bit curious about, is there more to life? What is my purpose? Feeling a little bit discontent. But as a very young woman, you followed that curiosity, and it led you all the way to India, to the feet of an enlightened guru, and you stayed there for 40 years. So I would just love to know, what were you seeking when you left New Zealand as a young woman? And what did you find in him that answered that call?
Beautiful. It was when I was around 17. Was in that transition between having left school and I was at university. But I didn't really feel that at university I was very inspired, actually. And I think it was at that time that I really started asking the bigger questions. And having come from a family, actually, of privilege, there was a sense of opportunity. And yet I had seen a kind of hypocrisy in life, that which is on the surface, that which is easily seen, how you behave, what you have, and how you present yourself, that was not necessarily leading to inner happiness and harmony, not even harmony within the family. And so it leads you to ask, well, if that is not the path ahead, what is there? And it leaves you in a kind of existential void in a certain way. And that's when I just started searching for a meditation teacher. And I wanted to learn meditation as a study, not as a adopted lifestyle or personality adaptation, or I didn't want to take on a personality of a spiritual seeker or a disciple, which in the late 70s were the more prevalent. I don't know where it came from, but I had a sense that meditation can be a study. And in that study, I thought you come to see something deeper than what was just being presented. So I did go to several different meditation groups, and I didn't pursue any of them until I did find my guru and my teacher, because he was quite unique and revolutionary in that way.
So, meaning that you found him very authentic.
Well, one of the first things that he said to me, if you come here, do not come here as a disciple. If you stay here, you will become a master. He never wanted a big organization. There was never any more than 200 people there at one time. There was no advertising of him. There was no sense that he had to increase his popularity. He was really authentic, as you said. In that way, I feel quite simple, not obviously simple in intelligence and in his state, but simple in that he remained very clear and very true to the teachings, which we can go into, and not so much about making a big movement. And that appealed to me.
So there was no ego.
Yeah, and meeting him, it was not about him. Really, it was funny because you said, I came to the feet of the guru, and I know that is a classic expression. But when you said it, I thought, actually, I came in front of the mirror of the guru. And I felt when I met him, it was a unique experience of looking at myself in his mirror. Like he was a mirror. He wasn't really a person, although he was a person, obviously, but he reflected an inner self that I had never seen, that I obviously deeply wanted to see, that I didn't even know that that's what I wanted to see until I saw it.
Wow, that's so powerful. You just said he reflected an inner self that you didn't even realize you were seeking. Let's jump into that a bit more, if you don't mind, because if you haven't read my book, I talk a lot about this inner and outer self that I certainly didn't realize I even had an inner self. So I called my outer self Laura, and that is the self that is conditioned by the world around us. So our thoughts, our fears, and our thinking. And then through all this spiritual seeking, I did unearth this inner self. It's this kind of elusive missing piece of the puzzle. And I called her Arabelle. So I'd love to just touch on a bit more or hear from you. What is this notion of this inner and outer self? And is it universal? Do we all have it?
Lovely. Well, it's the nature of everything, not just of human beings, but there is an outer expression. You could even looking out the window now, seeing the trees, seeing the grass, seeing flowers, seeing the wood of the house, seeing this body too, that everything that is seen, we can say that is the obvious manifestation. But what is that life-giving principle and that life force that animates all of this? So there's an unseen aspect. Like, for example, a tree, we see the trunks and we see the branches, but we never see the seed. That seed is pure potential. And pure potential is unformed, but it had that life force. But it's not like the seed, once it developed into a tree, then jumped away and became something else. So the seeking of a human being is to want to know themselves as that pure potential, as that pure life force. That the tendency is to try and discover it as a form.
So I guess that's similar to us as humans. There's a force that transformed that seed into a tree. And there's also a force that transforms us from egg to embryo to baby to toddler to adult. And that is that life force you're calling the pure potential. And what I hear you saying is that as adults, we try and feel that pure potential through our outer selves, through our outward achievements, be it through our careers or sport, or it can take many forms. As you say, you use that word form, but what that looks like is, getting straight A's or being top of our sport or whatever form it takes. But actually, that life force or that pure potential is actually who we are. It's within us and it's never left us. It's been with us at every single phase of our evolution. Is that what I hear you saying there?
It's not separate from us. Not only does it not leave us, there is no separation between pure power, which we can also say pure existence, pure consciousness, and how it is manifest, the seen world or the seen obvious manifestation, that they're actually one and the same thing. The unseen power is the same as the seen manifestation. So as you said, I spoke about the tree, but it's exactly the same with a human being in all aspects of life.
So, was that the primary teaching of your guru then? So, when our attention goes to the outward achievements or the outer self, to redirect it back to that inner self or that inner life force?
Yes, so the teachings formally would come under the category Advaita Vedanta. So Advaita means non-dual, that there is no separation between the power that gives rise to the manifestation and manifestation itself, that they are one thing. And Vedanta means the knowledge of that. All that which is obviously seen and known by a human being, it is not at all separate from the spirit or the energy or the power that animates it.
I think many of us, I mean, absolutely, myself included, we don't feel like we're part of this non dual, interconnected whole. When you describe it, I can see that there is absolutely this life force that's within me, that's within you, that's within everyone listening, that's within the tree, and that life force is this interconnected thing that runs through all of us. But most of us just feel like our individual selves, trying to pay our taxes and do our best in life. So how does knowing that we have this pure potential or this life force that is part of the whole, how does simply knowing that, how does that change your life? Or how can we expect that knowing to change our life?
Wonderful. And that's exactly the right question. Now, what we can turn our attention to now is to say, why are we even asking the question? Why are we even seeking? Because a human being struggles. Because there is a sense that every human being has that there is a me, and that me is associated with this body, and this body, me, has many thoughts and many feelings, many ambitions and desires. And those ambitions and desires, well, it can only be in two ways. Either that desire is fulfilled or the desire is frustrated. If that desire or wish for something to manifest, if it is fulfilled, it felt like that was what they wanted. But having got that, they felt, well, no, that didn't permanently or deeply satisfy, and they're on to the next. Or they feel a sense that now being satisfied, I have to hold on to that. So when one realizes the inherent fleeting nature of all of that, and ultimately either disappointing or frustrating, and endlessly acquiring nature of all of that, one is brought to the inquiry. Well, what is actually happening here? This is a sense of duality. There's a me and a world, me and others. And even that duality goes to me and my mind, me and my feelings. This dual sense, this divisive sense of self is ultimately a struggle because it is in the field of this pull and push. So this is what brings us to question. And as you said, well, how has turning the attention to non-dualism helped me and helped human beings in general? It is the remedy to the struggle of seeing ourselves as a separate someone, separated from all of this, and needing desperately to reach out to acquire it to fulfill us. And we know, as I said, the frustration and the antagonistic push and pull of that experience. So the development and evolution of the consciousness to realize what is non-dual, and that is what we can discuss a little further, the means to that is seen as the resolution of the struggle.
Yeah, I think many of us can absolutely relate to the notion of when I achieve X, I'll be happy. You know, when my cancer is stable, or when the kids are behaving, or when my business is earning enough money, I'll feel at peace. Or when the world stops being the way it is, I'll feel at peace. But actually, what I hear you saying is that peace does not come from any of that outer external achievement, but the remedy to struggle is when we stop focusing our attention outward and turn within and remember or unearth that life force that animates all of it. Because I just know in my own life when I am struggling because those external achievements aren't manifesting, when I take a moment to kind of connect with this Arabelle or this life force within me, then I do feel peace regardless of any outcome in the external outer world. So that kind of return, or that feeling, that life force, is another word for that oneness. So we hear that word a lot in the spiritual circles. Is that another way to describe this this life force that runs through all of us?
Yeah, lovely. Well, that's the deeper thread, isn't it? That's the title of your podcast. What is that which the thread that runs throughout? I find it helpful to turn our attention to the study and inquiry into oneness initially, to expose what appears to be oneness but is not really oneness. It is more on the level of preference, suitability, similar conditions. So I'm one with you so long as we agree, or so long as we look alike. So that level of oneness, as I said, suitability, will only go so far. And you see human beings have the tendency to divide themselves into groups of similarity. We look alike, or we pray to the same God, or we have the same political views. And so we are one. And this kind of oneness, you could say, is conditional. As you said, when this, then that. When I get the car, then I'll be happy, as you said, is the same as saying, so long as you fit this set of rules, then we get along. So it's conditional. So oneness is not conditional. So it is not sameness on the body level, how we look, how we act, or our age, or our sex, gender. It has nothing to do with how we feel, nothing to do with how we think, and nothing how we were conditioned. It is not how we view our world that is the same. Every viewpoint of what we call the world is absolutely unique. And we fool ourselves by pretending to share the same view. And many people just imagine themselves to be in the right view. I have the right view of the world. What's wrong with everyone else? Everyone else should view the world as I view it. Sameness is not oneness. You have exactly pinpointed it in the title of your podcast, the deeper thread. What is that thread that is not dependent on physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the ego body, and the circumstantial body? What is that thread? And you can simply call it life. We are all alive. We all breathe. Even trees are breathing. We're talking particularly about trees today because every time I look up, I see this beautiful ash tree.
So, to bring it back to that tree, the same life force that's in the tree, it's in me, it's in you, and it's also in the person who has completely different views to us.
Everything. So in Sanskrit, there are 3 words according to Advaita Vedanta tradition. Sat.
Shikha, before we get into those Sanskrit words, I just wanted to clarify. So, Advaita Vedanta, that's part of the ancient Indian Vedic tradition, and that's what you learnt with your guru?
That's right. So Sanskrit it's a language primarily. And in Advaita Vedanta, in the tradition of non-dual self-awareness, a lot of that knowledge was transmitted through the scripts that were written in Sanskrit language. So I refer to them because many of the enlightened beings revealed their vision of oneness through language. Also, obviously, through presence. That presence was also translated in language so that it could be realizable to anyone who wanted to do the same study. So Sanskrit has been a tradition, or I should say, the Sanskrit language is traditionally passed on by way of delivering these teachings of oneness. So why I refer to Sanskrit very often, and I don't, you don't need to do a big study of the language Sanskrit, it's not, but there are certain words that are conveyed which we don't really have in English or have been misunderstood and contorted somehow with our ideas. For example, I was going to say the word sat. The word sat means true or truth. Now, in English, that word truth, we have come to see it as I have to tell the truth, or the truth as I see it, which may differ from the truth as you see it. But in Sanskrit, it's interesting because the word sat also shares the meaning unchanging, ever present. Now it clues us in, it is meaning the truth that is the deeper thread that doesn't change, whether it is the life-giving force to that tree manifesting or life-giving form to this body and giving form to these words, the same life-giving power to your ears to hear these words and your listeners' ears to hear these words, and the same power that gives us the thinking power to hear, not only hear the words, but bring these words into a deeper meaning of how we can live without so much struggle, because we've brought in the true meaning of oneness, of truth. So it is not my truth versus your truth. Another meaning of Sat means pure existence. And then it has to accompany one more word, if you can cope with just two words in Sanskrit, the word Chit, C-H-I-T, which means pure consciousness, pure existence. But it's not only existing, it's also pure consciousness, pure intelligence. So that tree, that tree's getting a lot of airtime today. That tree is not only purely existing, it is also purely conscious. It knows when to fruit, or when to flower, when to drop its leaves, when to indraw its energy in the cold season, when to extend its energy in the warm season. So similarly, human beings have a pure intelligence, which is nothing to do with the kind of intelligence we talk of at school, which I would say is intellectual information. This is pure intelligence, pure knowing. And there's one third word, if you'll excuse me extending it one more, that has to go together, and it is Anand, which means pure bliss, pure love, pure well-being, pure vibrant existence, that there is delight and joy in existence and consciousness. We are born to love, to care for each other, to rejoice with each other, to delight in this manifestation. And our purpose and our true nature is not to suffer and be afraid and feel ourselves small and insignificant. And so the insignificant ego that has assumed itself so small, so divisive from everything else, and therefore needing to connect on a superficial level, the endless hunger to try and feed itself on that superficial level, that has to be addressed and can be addressed through the study of meditation, to realize meditation goes deeper than just the superficial. It is tapping into what is pure existence, pure consciousness, pure love, pure bliss. And that Sat Chit Anand is the same power that I am, that the lightning is, that the thunder is, that all this is. It is one power.
I really loved what you said just then. You said that our purpose is not to suffer. And I think we just need to let that sink in for a moment, because I think we can, I mean, myself, I'm absolutely included in this. We can get so caught up in our purpose being some achievement in this outer self, outer world. And to know that the delight and the joy and all those things that you spoke of, that comes from within. And it reminded me when you were speaking, I grew up in the Christian tradition. And I suppose many people like me, we were kind of raised to believe that God is this external force that lives in the sky. But I've been deconstructing that tradition within myself. And what I've uncovered is the primary teaching of Jesus is the kingdom of heaven is within. And heaven, when you really think about that word, that is peace, love, joy, bliss, justice, all the things that we seek. And Jesus said that is within. The kingdom of heaven is within, and that's what we all need to remember. So I was curious to get your thoughts on this. Is God another word for oneness?
Yes, absolutely. So every tradition and every culture has come up with some kind of terminology for the immense. It's much more in alignment with a verb than a noun. But we have attributed God to be a noun, or a pronoun, really, someone, or life to be some kind of thing. But actually, it is beingness. So it is the pure existence, has no noun. It has no form. God actually is not a noun, not a person. It is much more akin with beingness.
So let's now get on to, how does one begin to really know and feel this sense of beingness, or this sense of the kingdom of heaven within, this Satchit Ananda? How does one really understand that within themselves? I wanted to bring up an analogy that you have taught me, and I wanted to share it, and if you could speak to it a bit more. So you said that coming to know this truth within ourselves, we've got to think of it like a bird, and a bird has two wings. And one wing is exactly what we're doing now. It's the questions and answers. It's the churning of the mind. It's giving the mind some different thoughts and different concepts to kind of cling on to. It's that truth. And what I learned from you is that is called satsang. So that is what we're doing now. We're doing a satsang to churn the mind. And the other wing of the bird that you speak of, and you've got a whole business called the Wisdom of Meditation Center, and it's in New Zealand, and I'm going to put all of those details at the end. So the other wing of the bird is meditation. It is the stillness that goes with hand in hand with the knowledge. So I would love to know from you, what is meditation, and why is it such an important part of us coming to understand this truth within our own hearts?
Yes, beautiful. If we just stay on the level of language and terminology and bringing concepts and images, it has its very, very powerful effect of redirecting the attention that is otherwise, as you said, outwardly seeking, where it will only meet frustration, disappointment, or attachment to want more and more. So we have, through the discussion, through the inquiry, through concepts, terminology, images, we have started turning the mind to reflect inwardly. When we say only inward, it's not an exact direction, but it means deeper than. Turning it back to, what is this inner power? So the mind naturally starts to turn, we say more inner, or the underlying reality, that it means, what is the unseen, more essential power? We are reflecting upon it, and in that, the mind that is otherwise always outwardly seeking starts to turn to this more essential question. This is satsang. Why it is more powerful when it is accompanied with meditation is because meditation is like, you stay there. You bring the mind back into the essential, back to the essence of who we are. And now you let it be there. It is like you have brought all the ingredients to bake your cake. You have mixed up the batter. You have bought the sugar and the yummy chocolate and the flour and whatever else goes into it. And you bring it into one bowl. And I'm not a very good baker. You can see I'm struggling. What is the thing that you put cake into? A cake tin, I guess. Yeah. You put the mixture in the oven and you bake it. In other words, it goes through the fire of transformation. It transforms from the sticky mixture into something we can eat and digest and receive bliss from, and become delighted by. So meditation is that deep stillness within, which is not nothing, and it's not emptiness, and it's not devoid of thinking or devoid of anything. It is that underlying existence, which is very, very potent. And in that potency, a transformation that whereby the satsang is not now only concepts, images, and ideas. It really becomes what is then described as a revelation. And in that revelation, you may or may not adequately describe in words, and it is not an experience. It is that inner truth that becomes then revealed, and no one can take that away from you. You can say it becomes your lived realization.
Joy Regardless is out now. It's my raw, honest memoir about rediscovering the wholeness that's been hidden in our hearts all along, described as a must-read for any soul searcher. It's available on Amazon and in selected bookstores, and the link is in the show notes.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so I wanted to now give people a little bit of a glimpse into how we come to that lived realization within us through meditation. And in my own life, I know when I started meditating, I used to think that meditating was about stopping thought. And I soon realized that that was impossible. My mind is just so busy. So I sort of gave up on meditation for a while. And what I learned through you, probably you taught me so much, is to focus on that little gap between. So there's always a point where thought stops and another thought begins, or one breath stops and another breath begins. And there's this tiny little slither of space. And when I direct my attention into that slither of space, that's when I feel that heaven within, that kingdom of heaven within. That slither, that little gap, it's so peaceful. There's no thought. It's just space. And in that space, there's no worry. There's no struggle. We live at our purpose, which is not to suffer, as you say. So is that the practicalities of how we meditate? Do we just focus on that little gap between?
Well, in one way, not in one way, if we apply let me start that again. If we apply now what we have talked thus far about oneness, what is thought? It is a wave that we call thinking. So what meditation directly reveals, not just, as I said, as a concept, but directly reveals as that you, as that Sat Chit Anand, that pure existing being that is highly sensitively conscious, is the thread throughout. It is never coming and going. It is the ever-presence of your being and of your existence. Within that power of being and knowing, Sat and Chit, we experience a wave-like nature of thinking, of feeling, of sensing, certain imaginations that come, or certain memories that come, maybe even something very mundane like something you have to do. I have to take the car to the mechanic. From the most mundane to the most profound, what we experience as human beings is this wave-like nature of thinking. If we don't understand that it is the pure essence, Sat Chit Anand, the pure existence of being that is throughout the waves, then we will otherwise have a separative relationship with our thoughts, and they will feel problematic. It will appear that I have a problem because I can't stop thinking. And these thoughts have their own energy, and I seem to not have the power to stop them. So it is recommended as the meditation technique or the approach or method to meditation, rather than trying to stop your thoughts, which is impossible, and rather than struggling in any way with your thoughts, turn your attention to the unchanging presence or consciousness that is it's more obviously recognized if you watch for the space between your breaths, as you brought the example, or the space between thoughts. So you observe all the thoughts as waves, and you know that you, as the ocean, are never disturbed by the waves. So you are never disturbed by thinking. So you don't try and stop thinking, remove thinking, or control thinking, or push thinking away, or try and and feel bad about thinking in any way. Rather, I am pure consciousness, pure existence, pure love, pure presence, pure being. And initially, you're only bringing your thought there to reflect upon that. But in that practice, it becomes revealed as really deeply that is your true state. That is your essential state.
So one thing that you taught me, Shikhaa, if the ocean and the wave thing isn't landing for people, another analogy or another way to think of it that I really like is obviously we have this thought that is passing through like waves. And then we have this part of ourself that is able to observe those thoughts that pass through. It's able to observe when the thought stops, or it's able to observe when the breath stops. So we already know that there's two parts of us. There is the part that is thinking, that's the wave, and then we have this essence that's able to observe those thoughts. So what you taught me is to, if we're struggling with stopping thinking, is to bring our attention to the part of ourself that can observe the thoughts. And that is the part that is unchanging. As you say, it doesn't get entangled with the thought. It doesn't get carried off into happiness or sadness, wherever the thought train might lead. It is simply observing the thoughts that are passing through like clouds in the sky.
Yes, so chit, another definition in English of chit would be the observer, simply, which is also to say the ocean. As the observer, can you hear the rain? I hope it's not interfering. So you see, I can either be disturbed now by the rain, or I can see it. Everything that is of wave, of rain, of experience, of appearance, everything is allowed to be as it is seen in the whole oceanic expanse of myself, pure awareness, pure knower, pure existence, pure consciousness. And that's the constant practice. Keeping on bringing the attention there is the practice of meditation. The deepening of that meditation, it is really torrential. I'm now looking out into the gutters that are completely, like, pretty much non effective at all here. It's just bursting out. And you actually have the power not to be disturbed by manifestation, by the events, by the people, by the everything. Because if you don't try and control it, you work your way with it. And you see that there is no antagonistic force. There's actually no sense of being obstructed from your true nature that is blissful, is beauty, is love, is peace, is freedom, is harmony. Nothing impedes your knowing that. And that's why we need to sit in meditation, because it really is a turning back to knowing yourself as you truly are, ever present, ever free.
That was so powerful what you just said, that we really have the power not to get entangled in those thoughts, not to suffer. I mean, obviously there's conditions that come to that, life conditions, but I'm talking about people like you and I, and perhaps the people listening, where we are in a position where we can meditate and we can self-inquire. And we have a choice in any given moment. We can pause and we can turn within to that observatory power.
So instead of saying the word choice, which would maybe imply a kind of ego stance, like I choose, like a mental doing, and the doing being that kind of ego element, I am choosing with my mental force, with my mental control. Think of it much more, I am the power that can become aware of my true self as pure awareness, the observer, pure existence. Now, I have to know it directly, which is why meditation is important. But you must practice the power to know yourself as freedom, as the ever-presence. So I would, instead of say the word choice, say, I am the power. Not even that I have the power. It's a language thing, I know, but even I and the having of power is in this dualistic idea. So the vision of oneness is that their power alone exists, and I am that. It's not that I have that, I am that power. Do I become aware of that power? And ultimately, through satsang and meditation, as you said, the two wings of the bird, do I realize that? The realization of that is that I fly. I'm free.
And would you say that that really is the purpose of life, is to realize that within ourselves, to realize our true nature? Because when we begin to do that, that's how we begin not to stay in struggle and suffering.
Yes, I think not only the purpose of life, it is the driving force in everyone's life to know this, whether they direct the attention to realize that is the purpose or not, but everyone is being driven, whether it be ambitiously driven towards power or driven into depression or driven to get involved in sports or just the drive to try and stay secure and safe. Everyone is driven. There is a drive. Life is a driving force itself. But to use that drive to realize our true self that is free from the struggle that otherwise that drive to try and realize yourself through all those other temporary experiences, then definitely that is the purpose, to be free from struggle.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I know I'm a long way from being an enlightened guru, but what working with this knowledge has done for me, it's made me a lot more braver and courageous in the world, because when I know I have this inner power to come back to, I can use my voice more. I can do things like release a book that might challenge people in a way, because I feel a lot more empowered, because I have this inner true self to come back to, regardless of where the tides of life take me. So, just this knowledge that we have this within us in any given moment to return to, it's power, actually.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And I would just say, don't try and quantify or even qualify that power. Power is pure, indivisible, ever present power. That there's only one power happening. There's not many different powers. There's only one life force happening. That's all that is happening. So don't think I have just this much power, or I've only been able to exercise that much power. That you are the power. How much you are established in being convinced and completely unshaking from your conviction. I am pure power, regardless of how it manifests. You may write 50 books or you may write none. You may speak to hundreds of people of this knowledge, or you may stay silent. You may do many great things, or you may pass through this incarnation completely unknown and unrecognized. It is all the same power. How we manifest and how we are called to manifest, it's an indescribable uniqueness in every being, that it does not reflect as if some has big power, some has little power. And that's going back to what I was saying about meeting my guru being a mirror. There was no sense when I met him that he had the power and I didn't have the power. So I beg to differ when you said you are not the enlightened being. My guru would say, you are enlightened, but you just have not become convinced of it yet. Because enlightenment is the delight and light of that pure conscious being. And so realization means that you are now doubtless and well established in knowing it. That all is realization. Just how much does one realize it? How much one doesn't accept pain, suffering, division, smallness. If one can practice not accepting their limited self as their true identity, then what remains is the free being. And realization just means you are free from suffering.
Yeah, just when you were speaking just then about, how we could write 10 books or 50 books, it doesn't really matter how it manifests. it got me thinking about this illusion that I used to have, that, once we reach a certain point on our spiritual path, then life will just become this place of rapture and ease, and there'll be no struggle. Like, I won't have to do the house chores anymore. And actually, it just doesn't go like that at all. Like, it's not all rainbows and fairies. Of course, we still have to do the task of life. I have copious amounts of washing I have to do each day with 4 kids. So what I kind of realized within my own journey, it's more of a softening to life rather than life looks completely different. So the softening comes from the fact that when I feel irritation about XYZ in my life or in the world, I have this place that I can return to. And when I return to that through things like meditation or sitting in nature, then I can feel the peace. I can feel the irritation starting to dissolve. So that's what I mean by softening. Like, life doesn't go away, but the relationship to struggle does change.
Absolutely. You still have these bodies and have to do all those things that on the body level and the mind level is required. We are social beings and we should maintain kindness and well-being socially with each other. And there are certain laws of nature that we must respect, like if it's pounding with rain, probably a good idea to stay inside. And if it's too hot outside, sit under a shady tree. So all of those conditions of our manifest world remain the same. But what does get released is that our confusion about where happiness lies becomes crystal clear.
And while we're kind of busting all these illusions, I wanted to bring up one more illusion that seems to be in the world, is that when we do this inner work, it makes us more apathetic, like that we don't care about the woes of the world because we're just focused on our inner life. But actually, it's done the opposite for me. It's made me more determined to do whatever I can, and it's made me more able to use my voice in courageous ways. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, on the idea that spirituality and caring for the world, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a complete misunderstanding. With this knowledge, you become more tuned into life, and life is inherently life supporting of itself. So being in tune with life, you would never choose to be destructive or to be divisive or to be unkind. And as I observed in my guru and other well-aware, conscious beings, that only you are more in tune with well-being, kindness, love, harmony, delight, upliftment, inspiration, creativity. You're much more attuned with it. So anyone who says it brings a dispassion in that way has not realized the self.
And that's where your beautiful wisdom of meditation center comes in, because that's exactly what it's there to do. You and Mike have created a space that helps us remember who we are. It's uplifting. And I'm going to pop a link in the show notes to the center for everyone listening, because these guys offer amazing in-person and online retreats and offerings. So check that out. So I do have a final question, and we may have already covered this today. So as the podcast is called Deeper Threads, is there a deeper thread to life that you wanted to bring out to the light? So think of it more as, is there some final parting words you want to offer the listener that we haven't touched on today?
I certainly have come to know not to invest any sense of self, well-being, or self-worth, or value to what is not true. And I have done a deep study into what is not true, which reveals what is true, and what I call true is what you are calling the deeper thread. True in terms of unchanging, ever-present, pure, and free. call it the observer, call it pure consciousness, call it God, let it be by any name. It is simply the unchanging, ever-present. And pure, I like to think it is never made into any divisive entity. It remains always original. And that is the deeper thread. And to know that, I have found at least satsang and meditation have definitely been those two powers having brought together reveal the one power.
That's a really lovely way to end. So I think for the person listening, I hope this conversation has been one wing of that bird that's going to fly you all the way home. We've talked pretty deep today and given you lots of things for your mind to chew on. So I guess if you can take anything from today, it's keep the questioning, keep the mind churning, and bring all of that knowledge that you're gathering, all that learning and unlearning into the wisdom of meditation.
Yes, absolutely. And I do have many, many guided meditations on the Wisdom Library from our website, wisdomofmeditation.com. Breathing practices and music and all kinds of things. So I know this is a very deep knowledge, and it is difficult to encapsulate such depth in just one session. So please excuse me if I spoke a lot, but it needs follow-up, and that's what satsang is. If you're interested to go deeper in the liberation of the human potential, then it needs, like any great knowledge, it needs some depth and to really sit with it and let it go deep, let it mature, and let it become the reality of how you live. I can't say enough how liberating it is. It is nothing other than a discovery in a very quiet way. It's not a big lights and, some kind of, it's very simple. Just you start living more with more delight and more sense of unity with people and more sense of purpose, because there's much less clutter as to the doubts and false uh, assumptions that we have made. And that just frees up so much space to live our potential, which is pure, free, unchanging, ever present. So it does need time. You can't really encapsulate this deep knowledge, Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual tradition and wisdom, in just one session. So if anyone is interested in it, yeah, please, welcome to tune in to an ongoing study. And sorry to continue 1 second more, that's what your first question was to me. What drew me to India was not so much India, but I was drawn to study meditation as a study that liberates us from the otherwise antagonistic and dualistic nature of our relationship with our own mind, and thereby with our world and with our people that we love in our world. We don't have to be in a struggle with it. We can be liberated from that struggle.
Beautiful. And I cannot recommend the Wisdom of Meditation Center enough, and Shikha's online satsangs I have attended for many, many years. I used to do the Monday evening, but now we have soccer practice. But I will be back one day. It is such a wonderful community, and I miss them very much. So please continue with the learning if this episode has resonated with you. I did want to just say, Shikha, you said right at the beginning of this conversation that when you first met your guru, you felt like he was a mirror to everything that you were seeking. And I wanted to say that when I first met you, I felt exactly the same thing. And I just knew that you wanted nothing but my freedom and my liberation. And you have been so patient with me over the many, many years of me asking you questions, and you've always responded with such grace and warmth. And I just thank you so much. I thank you for being in my life and for being here on this podcast. You really are someone who walks the talk. So thank you for joining me today.
You're most welcome. I love it. And it's been a delight to do this podcast. And I just welcome anyone who's listening to knowledge of their own true self. It's very simple if you just know how to see it.
Normally, I like to wrap up each episode with a few takeaways, but honestly, I can't summarize this one in a few neat sound bites. Shikhaa speaks from such depth that conversations like this aren't meant to be digested quickly. They're meant to be marinated in. So, I invite you to listen again, meditate, seek more understanding, meditate again. And over time, little aha moments start to arise from within. That's been my experience anyway. Awakening doesn't happen in one movie-making moment. It unfolds through countless small, quiet realizations in the midst of everyday life. You simply wake up one day and you feel a little bit lighter, a little bit freer. That's my hope, that this podcast and my book, Joy Regardless, helps you feel a little bit lighter and freer on the road home to yourself. And please do check out the Wisdom of Meditation Center to help. It really is a gift. Not only do they offer a whole library of audio teachings and guided meditations, which are really worth listening to, they also run somatic body-based classes, both online and in person. I love the body-based work, and it's especially powerful for people like me with busy, very busy minds. Sometimes I find it hard to sit in the stillness of meditation, and that almost always means I need to first calm my nervous system through movement or somatic practices. A simple walk outside will do sometimes. All right, that was a big episode, so I'm simply going to close with this. Yes, life can absolutely be hard at times. I 100% know that. But our purpose, as Shikhaa reminded us, is not to suffer. And these two wings of the bird, these two great powers, self-inquiry or satsang and meditation, help us move through the struggle rather than stay stuck in it, because we begin to cultivate an inner sanctuary to return to, no matter what's happening on the surface. That's the realization I came to enjoy regardless, and Shikhaa has been instrumental in helping me see that truth. So thank you again, dear Shikhaa, for joining me and supporting me for all these years. And thank you to you for listening and being here. Much love until next time. Thanks for listening. If this episode resonated, subscribe over at laracharles.substack.com to ask any questions. The link is in the show notes. My Substack newsletter and this podcast are free because I believe these conversations and reflections should be available to everyone. But I am a one-woman show and any support would be so appreciated. If you are in a position to support my work financially, you can become a paid subscriber over at Substack for just the price of a cup of coffee a month, and you get the audiobook version of my memoir for free as a thank you gift. I'm so grateful to everyone who has already become a paid subscriber. You help me keep this project going. This podcast is also available on Apple or Spotify, and you can follow by clicking the plus or follow button. Deeper Threads is here to help us remember who we are beneath the surface. It's a show for anyone yearning for more meaning. So please share the podcast with your loved ones, because we get to more depth, kindness, and justice, all the good stuff, when we are all willing to dig a little deeper. Thanks so much to you for being here.